Today's video, we are going to release and also explain how you can make your own custom Windows 11 ISO. So this will be a step-by-step detail. Now, the benefits to making a custom ISO is from the get-go, you have all the settings that you've changed. And so if you reinstall Windows on not just your own computer, but you want to reinstall Windows on friends' computers, or even start with a fresh install of Windows, then you can just use your own custom ISO, or of course, use the one that we're providing in the link in the description below to save you all the time. But just for transparency, we're going to go through the list of changes we've made, as well as showing you guys step by step how you can make these changes too, so you can get an awesome custom light Windows 11 install that's not just going to be better for gaming, but also better for power users and people who are, say, using this as a workstation or maybe something for streaming. So let's get straight into today's tutorial, where the first thing you need to do is go to the Microsoft Windows website. We'll put the link in the description below for this too, and download a Windows 11 ISO. Once you've downloaded that ISO, we then double click this and then we go mount as a virtual DVD. And now within Windows, we then copy all the files off this essentially virtual DVD and then put it into a folder on our desktop. And then from here, we've got to get the second step of today's tutorial, and that's a thing called NT Lite, or a program called NT Lite. Now, download this only from ntlite.com. I wouldn't recommend any other websites or places to download this from, because you could pick up malware or something that's hacked. So only get this from the official ntlite.com. Again, we'll put the link in the description below for this too. Now, this is the free version. You can get away with using the free version. So you just download it, you click on the free version. You don't need to buy anything and get the extra features for now. And open the downloaded installer and go through the setup process once you've downloaded this. And then after this, you can open NT Lite and then essentially click on the free license and just click OK. Now, once this program's installed, we can then move on to opening up the stock ISO. However, before we add this in, we're going to quickly get onto today's video sponsor, which is directly related to Windows 11 itself, and that is VIP SCD keys, where you can get a legit single and OEM user license for as little as $15 US using the coupon code BFTYC and the link in the description below. Now, we're saying Windows 10 in the ad here because you can use Windows 10 Pro key licenses to activate Windows 11 Pro. They're essentially interchangeable licenses, so you always want to go for the cheaper one and save yourself some money anyhow. But the links will be in the description below. You can get a great deal. I've been using SCD keys here for years and years. Never had a problem with any of their Windows 10 or Windows 11 licenses, so I can thoroughly recommend them. So links will be in the description below. Make sure you use that coupon code for a juicy discount. Though, getting back to the tutorial here with NT Lite. So once you've opened up this program, we can then go to add and then go to over here with our image directory, left click that, and then we can left click on the whole folder where we copied all the previous contents to. In this case, we've called it Windows 11 extracted. And then once you click OK, it'll bring up a list of all the different Windows 11 installs we can choose from. And since we're focusing on Windows 11 Pro here, we can just go down to Windows 11 Pro and left click and double click this and essentially load this ISO up. And now once it's confirmed loaded, you should see a heap of options here on the left that deploy, and then this essentially allows you to edit the actual ISO itself, which is what we've already done with the ISO that we're going to be uploading and sharing here today. But we'll go through this step by step, where mainly especially if you're deploying, say there's 100 systems with GT 1030s and stuff like that, you can install your own custom drivers from the get-go, which saves you downloading, say, the NVIDIA drivers from the website. You can just install those straight away and save yourself a lot of time. But since we've got single end PCs that we focus on here at Tech City at my studio, we can go download all the latest drivers manually. So we can skip this, essentially integrate the first three tabs here. So the first step that we're going to be doing with our ISO here today is removing components on the sidebar here. Left click on components, it'll bring up a warning message, and we just click OK and keep rolling through. Now, it'll bring up different tabs here within the components. And what we go through this list is we're going to ignore drivers, hardware support, and also ISO image. We're not going to touch any of those, but we are going to go down to this little arrow here and left click on this, localization. And then within this list, we are going to find that there's the language tab that is available to essentially modify. Now, what we're going to be going through here is just left clicking all the languages we do not need. Now, this is why it's important to show this tutorial, because if we don't, say for instance, if you Chinese is either your first or second language and you need that, you can then make your own custom ISO and modify this and bring this back into the one we've already done. But for me personally, I only use English and Japanese, so I'm getting rid of all these other languages that I don't need and essentially debloating my Windows install from the get-go. So this is very important to do because it just essentially makes your install smaller. Though after that, we're going to go down now to multimedia, and then we go down this little arrow, left click this, right down to the Xbox Core here. And now because I don't use any of the Xbox Core features, if you're like me and you don't use this stuff, you just left click that and it'll get rid of all these Xbox Core features. So we can remove that completely. Then we go down to network here. And there's another interesting thing. I mean, a lot of people will call this controversial, but Internet Explorer, we get rid of this because I personally use Edge anyway, which is a different browser to Internet Explorer. Though then below Internet Explorer, this is actually a little bit of a tricky one here, and it's payments, which originally is grayed out. But if we left click this little arrow, it then brings up wallet service, which we can get rid of. So we can left click that, and then that will actually undo payments itself. So this is the back end, which is needed for the wallet app or Microsoft Windows payment system, which I don't use. And I actually haven't heard of any of my friends or colleagues using this service. So I like to disable this. It's a service that will free up some bloat while we are using Windows 11. Though after that, we can then move down to another list here, and that is left click on this little arrow, remoting and privacy. And what we want to do within here is disable remote assistance, because this is actually a common one that a lot of hackers like to utilize. So not only are we disabling a service, but we're also making it so your home PC has better security than it's ever had. So left clicking on remote assistance, and then also left clicking on remote desktop server. So we don't need any of these services, especially if we're a gamer or single end workstation. However, this service can be critical for some people, so I would enable this on a one-to-one basis if you need it, but for the majority of people, they just simply don't need this service enabled. They're going down to system here and unfolding this with that beautiful left click arrow. We can find that there is a service that I like to disable here, and that is Hyper-V integration services. Of course, if you are using virtual machines, you may wish to leave this on, but since I don't need it, I turn this off personally. Though moving through this list, this one is probably one of the most important, and this is Windows apps. So left clicking this little Windows apps brings up another tab below it, which is also apps. And there is, I mean, so many dirty apps in here that a lot of people don't need. It's very unhygienic to have these apps on your computer. And instead of going through one by one and uninstalling all these apps, we can just have it so that they're not there from the get-go, as well as making our ISO install smaller to begin with, taking up less SSD space. So going through the list here, we can uncheck Clipchamp, uncheck Cortana, uncheck Feedback Hub, uncheck Films and TV, especially if you're like me and you're using a custom program like VLC. And then we can left click and uncheck Get Help. I mean, if you need help, I would probably recommend not getting it from Microsoft anyway. And then moving on here, we can uncheck also mail and calendar, since I use a different mail and calendar system, as well as the Microsoft News, and then Microsoft People, Microsoft Solitaire Collection, and then Microsoft Sticky Notes, as well as Microsoft To Do, MSN Weather, and then also Office, since that is the trial version. And if I install Office, I usually go to Microsoft's website itself and download the pack that I need for that particular Office install. And then left click here, Power Automate, as well as Quick Assist. I don't use any of these. And then also tips for getting started, since this is pretty much considered more advanced tutorials here today. I'm sure people don't need basic tips for using Windows. And then we unclick also Windows Alarms and Clocks, Windows Maps, and Windows Media Player, since I really don't like Windows Media Player, just like before. We're using VLC, and then Windows Voice Recorder. I don't use this. However, here's where below that you've also got the Xbox app and the game plugins, and this goes hand in hand with also the Xbox Game Pass. So if you use that on PC and you get a lot of value out of that, do not uncheck the Xbox core components that we unchecked before, as well as do not uncheck all these apps. However, since my Xbox Game Pass actually ran out and I just don't have that much time to game nowadays and I game on Steam, I'm going to uncheck all of these. Though after going through that massive list of removals, remove components, we're now down to the next tab on the side here, and that is configure, and we're left clicking on features, and there's actually some features that we can remove here. Going into it, we've got Windows Media Player. We're going to straight away uncheck that, which is weird because we already unchecked the Windows Media Player from the apps and stuff like that, but it still embeds a core feature into the OS. That's all for these features here. Of course, if you don't print anything from your printer, you can also disable print, though since I do use a printer with my PC, I leave on the print services. Though moving now onto the tab below that, and that's the configure, and left clicking on the settings tab here, there's actually a few settings to go through. So we can left click on this little desktop arrow here. Though first up in desktop, we've got the accent color. Now the default blue, I like to change this to red. This is important if you've got also a brand and you're selling PCs, and say for instance your main color is purple or pink, if that's your thing. You can just hit this little drop down bar here and select the color you want. Now, for me, red always goes faster. I pick a bright red for the accent color, and this will also apply, especially to your inactive title bars. This will flow through and default darker on that setting. So you know when your inactive title bars, they'll just be a darker red, for instance. However, you can change these settings the way you like. I just like having red from the get-go. The next up here is a very important setting for me personally on Windows 11. It's actually one that annoys me, and that's the classic context menu. I prefer having this. This is when you right-click things on the desktop. In Windows 11, it brings up this new menu, but I like the Windows 10, for instance, the menu there. So we can drop down here and then click enabled. That's just going to make Windows 11 that much better than it was. Then next up here, we've got dark mode for apps as well as dark mode for Windows. Both of these I like to enable, as well as enabled here for dark mode for Windows. And then we got next up here on resume display login screen, which I personally like to do. This is also important even if you don't have a password set. It's just to know that your computer was asleep and then it's woken up sort of thing. So you can get some confirmation here that nothing's bad's happened if you've let your computer go to sleep. So I like to have this enabled personally. The next up here is enhanced pointer precision. I like to have this on enabled since, as I said in the previous optimization tutorial, I'm an RTS player as well as I utilize this with video editing. Now, if you're a pro FPS player, you may wish to actually disable this setting. But since this is a tech, yes, Windows 11 custom ISO, I'm going to have this actually on enabled from default. The next up here, we've got down to the show people on taskbar. I like to disable this since I don't need this useless little tab running on my taskbar. Though we've also got the taskbar settings, which I like to have my alignment on left. Some people prefer this in the middle. Choice is yours. I'm turning this on left for this tutorial. And then we've also got the widgets, which we can disable, as well as the chat, which I don't use the taskbar chat setting either. Then there's also the Windows Teams install. I like to have this on disabled since I never use Microsoft Teams. Some people do. If you need Microsoft Teams, you can just manually install it anyhow. Then the last setting within this sublist is use the print screen button to open screen snipping. I personally actually like this enabled by default because it just makes things so handy. Instead of me just screen grabbing a regular screenshot and then copy pasting it into, say, Paint, for instance, and saving that as an image, I can just actually snip it out with snipping tool and then save that manual custom snip. Easier, faster, and quicker by using the print screen button. Though 2 tabs down from that sublist that we had before is the Explorer sublift, so we can left click on this, and within here there's 2 settings that we are going to disable, and they're right next to each other, and that is show sync provider notifications. We're going to disable this, as well as show task view button. Now moving on to another new sub tab here, just 2 lots below that is power control, left clicking on this, and here's where we can go to fast startup and then left click enabled. Of course, some people will have this disabled, but it's good. I like it. I prefer my PC starting up faster, so I prefer to have this on enabled. Then going down to the shutdown menu and clicking sleep, clicking disabled. If not used, you can also enable hibernate here, but since I like my PC really to only run in one low power state, and that is the C1E essentially, or even C3 Max, I like to have this disabled. So, and then onto the next sublist, and this is privacy, and here's where we can go through quite a few settings here. Though within this menu, we can go down to allow telemetry, and then left click the little arrow on the right here, and then go down all the way to security, with a column and then disable policy. So this is a higher level than security disable. So we want to make sure the policy is disabled from the get-go. And then we're going to continue on with disabling pretty much all these automatically settings here. The next one is automatically connect to suggested open hotspots disabled, automatically install suggested apps disabled. And then underneath that is the clipboard history. And then we can enable this because I actually like this, especially if you're using the Windows V copy paste feature, which I find extremely useful, especially if I'm selling gaming PCs between different platforms. I can copy not just the title, but the information and the tags, and have those all loaded up in Windows Clipping V feature. So I'm actually make sure this is enabled for me personally because I love this feature. Then below that is collect contacts to let Windows and Cortana better understand you disable. I don't want Cortana better understanding me. I already got enough people in my life that do understand me quite well, and they don't use any sort of telemetry either. Then there's the next one, collect type text, and we disable that as well as collect written text with ink and disable that too. And then there's Cortana, we can disable that manually as well. Feedback frequency, going down to the feedback frequency setting, disabled too. And then going down to another few options below that, let Microsoft provide me more tailored experiences with relevant tips and recommendations by using your diagnostic data, disabled. And then there's let Windows collect my activities from this PC timeline, disabled, though just below that's actually one that I have enabled, and that's let Windows track app launches to improve start and search results. So if I'm, say for instance, playing a few games and a few apps that I use a lot, they're going to come up in the Windows start menu quite a lot, which is what I do prefer. Then there's occasionally show suggestions in start, disabled. Then pre-installed apps and OEM apps, both disabled. Send Microsoft info about how I write to help us improve typing and writing in the future. Sounds like telemetry to me, disabled. Suggest ways I can finish setting up my device online. They should rename this one, suggest ways I can get further telemetry on my PC. Well, disabled. Then there's two search settings here I like to disable as well. Allow cloud search as well as include Bing web results. Now the one find my files is what we mostly use when we're searching things on our own PC, right? So having both of these disabled in between this find my files will make it so that when you're searching for something on your computer, it doesn't bring up some crappy Bing search result in the start bar. So I like having this disabled just for ease of use on my search bar itself. Then there's the final two settings in privacy that I like to disable here, and that's use page prediction to improve reading and speed up browsing. And I like the last part of that, right? Your browsing data will be sent to Microsoft. So disabled, that's less telemetry again on your Windows 11 install. Then there's the one below that, Windows Spotlight. Again, tips and suggestions. So we're seeing this recurring theme, suggestions and tips, all telemetry-based services. We're going to disable those. Though after we're done with that privacy list, we can then move on now to system. And there is an important setting here, just two little tabs down. And this is on the full screen optimizations. So this is one I like to have enabled by default because I always use programs in full screen if I can, especially when I'm gaming as well. The next one here is hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. I'm actually going to enable this for this tutorial since the majority of people will be gamers. However, for me personally, I actually do disable this on my computer for video editing software. So important to distinguish here because this is actually specific to a Adobe Premiere Pro bug. So usually I do have this enabled, but for my own install, I actually will go back and manually disable this later. Then next up here, we have local user account setup support enabled. Then we go into Microsoft account here, and I like to have this on allowed, mainly because Minecraft does use Microsoft account. However, for me personally, I'm going to then disable this after the custom ISO. And so if you don't play Minecraft or you don't use anything with the Microsoft App Store, for instance, then you can go users can't add or log on with Microsoft accounts. Then just below that, there's OneDrive disabled. Then below that, remote desktop should already be disabled due to the settings that we changed before. But going down to setup RAM, we can actually go to disabled here. And then just below that, TPM and secure boot, disable this too. So now this Windows 11 custom ISO won't need any of this TPM or secure boot garbage. And we can also apply this to the host setting as well. So again, disabled. Then there's Windows Storage Sense, which is a whole, I guess, tab in itself that has other services attached to it. we can disable this completely. And there's variable refresh rate. We're actually going to have this enabled by default. Now, if you don't have a variable refresh rate monitor, this setting's essentially going to do nothing. But then below that is the final setting, and that's virtualization-based security. We're actually going to disable this. However, when you do disable this, you do lose essentially one layer of security, though it's up to you guys. I do like more performance, and that's because it comes from that inspector and all those other things that were supposed to wreak havoc in terms of security, but they never came to fruition. So me, I like my apps running not in a VBS environment, so I like this disabled personally. The next up here, we've got Windows Update in a new sub list, and we're going to go down to delivery optimization. And this little drop down menu here, we're going to select peering on LAN and internet with cloud service. So essentially this is the default setting, but we're going to make sure it is the default setting here, where essentially if Microsoft servers are slow, you can get your updates a lot faster and quicker by having this setting enabled. But another plus here is also Xbox games will download a lot faster too. Whew, and all that out of the way, we are done for the Configure Settings tab. It's time to move over now to the Configure Services tab. Now this one, I promise you, is not as long as the previous one, but there is some important settings here, and we'll start off with one that I always disable in all of my optimization tutorials, and that's going down here to Connected User Experiences and Telemetry. By essentially dropping this down and clicking Disabled, and then also going down to Distributed Link Tracking Client, and this one is going to disabled as well. Also, some people say with distributed link tracking client disabled, some NASs don't work properly. I've had absolutely no problems here accessing my NAS both locally and over WAN and having this service disabled. So your mileage may vary. So I did promise you that tab was going to be quick. Now we're going down to a new tab and a new sub tab, and that is Automate, and then we're left clicking on Unattended. And within this list right here, we're going to select Enable in the toolbar. So Enable right here up the top of the whole program. Left click that, and that's going to then enable us to change all the settings within this list. So what we're going to do here after we've hit this Enable, before we go into the actual sub list, where our regular settings are, we're going to left click on Copy to Install Image, Copy to Boot Image, and Prompt Edition Selection. Then after this, we can go into the list finally, and then go down to System Locale, left click on this little arrow here, and select your main language. This is the most important thing here. However, for this ISO, we will leave this blank so you can select your custom language when you're installing Windows and just essentially add an extra step. But it's one that'll just save you a lot of time within the custom ISO. Same, of course, is true for UI language and user locale. And then moving on to time zone, since I'm sure a lot of people all over the world would be downloading this, we're going to leave this on default as well. Though when you get into Windows, you can change your time zone by just quickly clicking the automatically adjust your time and then unclicking it, and it'll actually work off your IP address to change that setting for you. And you can essentially then have it not running by unchecking it after it's set everything up. So going down to the sub tab, Shell Options, and the sub tab out of box experience, we can go here to skip EULA page. So we can make sure, go left click on this little arrow, click true. So we want to skip all that crap that we have to scroll through and click accept on. And then on skip local account setup here, we can just go and make sure this is set on the false value. And then the one below that, skip online account setup Microsoft account, we're going to make sure this is then set to true. And then after we are done with Automate Unattended, we can then go left click on the post setup, and then right up the top here, we can left click add, and then go to template, and then go to disable hibernate. And this will essentially turn off hibernate from the get-go with our computer, since we already have sleep disabled. This is more for power users and gamers, of course. If you appreciate your PC going to sleep, for me, if I'm going to be away from my PC for periods of time, I actually just turn it off. And another beautiful thing about this setting is it also frees up SSD space. And now that we've done all the nitty-gritty settings and we've gone through all that, it's time to finally go down to the Finish tab here, the sub tab Apply, and there's a few final settings that we're going to go over to finally make this ISO a reality. And left click the Save the Image, just make sure that's checked. And then we're also going to left click this little arrow here, Remove Non-Essential Additions. And what we're going to make sure here is that we're going to leave Home as well as Windows 11 Pro. That's already loaded. Of course, that's going to be grayed out because that's one we modded, but we're getting rid of all the non-essential additions here that I don't essentially see people using. But we're also going to keep the Microsoft Windows PE, the boot WIM there as well. So there's two other check marks here. And then there's the final task to do, since we got the Windows 11 Home as well as the Windows 11 Pro. and we're just going to left click on this little box here, and that is the reapply task across editions. Now we're actually going to unfold all these little boxes individually because it kind of doesn't confirm everything from the get-go. So going through all these boxes and then left clicking them actually brings up and makes sure all the sort of settings that we changed before are going to be applied to this Windows 11 Home install too, which is actually a good thing if you guys want to just install Windows 11 Home and have it modded just like Windows 11 Pro. And the main reason for this is, say for instance, you've only got a Windows 11 Home license, and whether you got it for free or whatnot, you're going to extract nearly all the same benefits that we did here with Windows 11 Pro. So that's just a bonus added feature that we're giving for you guys in today's tutorial, and also the custom ISO. So hopefully that helps you guys out. And then after we've done all that, we can then left click on create ISO, and then we're going to call this Tech Yes Windows 11 Power Edition, and that's power to the people with this Windows 11 install. Then we're going to click desktop and then click save, and that's going to make that image for us. And then with that custom ISO now created on our desktop, we can essentially load that into a USB bootable, and we've now got our custom ISO ready to deploy on fresh installs, or if you want to reinstall Windows on your PC. Of course, if you're doing the latter option, make sure you back up all your important files. You're not leaving anything on the table so you don't reinstall Windows and go, where was that important list of things I had to get this month and I no longer have it? Well, that's because you reinstalled your PC. But anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed today's tutorial and also detail of the custom Windows 11 ISO Pro Edition that we did here at Tech Yes City. I'll put the links in the description below for the ISO where you can download this. Also, feel free to share this if you appreciate it. And also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, and also let us know in the comment section below if there's any custom changes you would make to this ISO personally. But as always, with most things we do around Tech Yes City, we don't cut off everything because, for instance, we don't go into the registry, change any registry settings, because in my personal experience, there's things that you can cut off in Windows too much, and it really affects the everyday usage, and you get these annoying error messages and whatnot. We've made sure this edition will be as stable as possible while still reaping the most benefits out of a custom Windows 11 ISO. Now, also stay tuned. We will have a Windows 10 and a Windows 10 tutorial as well as ISO coming out too. So I'm going to help both markets here and make sure you guys have the best experience when it comes to not only operability, but also FPS. Anyhow, guys, with that aside, big thanks to today's video sponsor as well, VIP SCD Keys. If you want to get that Windows 10 or Windows 11 Pro OEM single end user license, you can do so for as little as $15. I'll put the link as well as the coupon code. Be sure to use that coupon code BFTYC on checkout to get that big discount. Anyhow, with that aside, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now, and if you stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, as always, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out for now. Bye.